This image is an initial attempt to indicate visually the relationship between PIEPR as a new community interest company and the wider PIES project, the work we are trying to develop. And with this I aim to indicate the range, the scope of the opportunity and also the challenge. And in the course of this presentation I'll touch at least briefly on the income generation prospects, short-term and long-term, the theory of change that underlies this, and the approach to collaboration and partnership that I hope will make sense in this context. So I suggest that we might see this whole project as being like a set of Russian dolls. As a CIC, small and newly formed, we do now have a status as an organisation to begin to attract investment, particularly philanthropic investment and research investment, to grow. But with no staff yet, and little or no funds and no track record, at least as a company. But the CIC does now inherit a huge amount, a huge investment of time and resources in the form of the PIES ideas, the community and the momentum that has built up over the past 10 years or more. In particular, the CIC now manages the PILink website with its multiplicity of pages, its library and forums, and a membership of currently about 1,500, heading for 1,600. And the CIC also has the intellectual property behind the pizzazz, the self-assessment and service developmental audit tool, and the software version of the pizzazz, the PIEPR. Both the website and the software were developed on the freemium model, and the implications of that for future income we'll come back to later. The point is that the aim of the PILink was and continues to be a resource and a home for a growing PIES community of practice, with a wealth of information and inspirational content discussions and a range of activities to engage and to support members. And this reflects the theory of change that, as I put it once, we learn most, we learn best, and we learn fastest when we learn from each other, when we learn together. And the point here is that there are no experts here telling others what they should do. There are only some who are much further down the road with experience to share. Now, these activities of the PIES community are currently almost exclusively online, though face-to-face events in multiple localities are highly effective in generating momentum and in encouraging these discussions and mutual understanding. They're also highly labour intensive, and part of the task for the future, therefore, is to gather the resources to enable us to do more of such energising work. To some extent we can work through associates, people we are close to in local areas who can carry the message, and in PIE champions, the people within particular organisations or networks who espouse, promote and support and inform the people they are in more continuous contact with. Now, that community of practice developed first in the homelessness sector, though it quite quickly spread as it was taken up by many linked, comparable, related services for people with such complex needs. And this widened the vision of where these ideas might be helpful, where it might go. As a result, even what we mean by a PIE has evolved in the course of these discussions. The first accounts of the PIE approach were focused mainly on homelessness and on places, environments like day centres, hostels, refuges, move-on accommodation. Then a revised formula known as PIES 2.0 made room for this gradual expansion of where the ideas were going, and it included ways to explore the wider network of services in which any one service might operate, with a view to tackling gaps and barriers that limit the effectiveness of any service and of the service's environment as a whole, the ecosystem, as we sometimes call it. This then allows us to bring into the dialogue many of the services that work with the same or comparable needs, where closer collaboration and mutual understanding would be helpful, and particularly at local level where people can meet face to face and work together around particular needs, particular clients and client groups, particularly around any obstacles, barriers, systemic difficulties. So the PIEPR framework, on which the PIEPR and the PIEPR, as we'll see later, work, aims to create a single framework for all services trying to manage complex needs. With the creation of the CIC, there's now scope for development into other areas where such complex needs are found, and where services and agencies need to find ways to respond effectively, so we can move outside of the homelessness field in a much more planned and strategic way. In this, our work is still just one element of a major societal change, a movement towards more responsive, more needs-led, empowering, relationship-focused services, and not just for the client, the end user, but equally for the staff, whose own needs and strengths cannot be ignored, must be worked with. So giving the staff a voice in a say as to how services developed is an important part, and training and support for staff was one of the first things that really worked within the hopelessness sector. And of course, we cannot do this all on our own. Besides a network of associates in local areas who can be spread across the country to ease the travel costs and to provide a ready focus for local events, we need to work with many other organisations whose staff and activities we are supporting. In particular, we can aim to work with those membership organisations that aim to represent a range of services in any sector. And where possible, we can aim to collaborate with such agencies, for example, in applications for funding for projects of development or research, where they might be co-applicants or lead applicants, which takes the pressure off us as a very small tail wagging a large dog. Essentially, the PIEPR approach, as it is based in dialogue, is essentially an action learning model. And the research we can promote is all about learning from using the tools to create change, which is partly the ideas and partly some of the particular tools such as the PIEPR and the abacus. And at this point, the fact that PIEPR has the website, the community practice, the resource library, the momentum and the credibility, and crucially, the intellectual property for the PIEPR and the PIEPR. All this means that although a junior partner in age and in resources, we have a key role to play. One such collaboration we're interested to develop, for example, is with a new media publisher and events management company that can record many of our events, particularly online conferences and so on. And this can produce training material, not just for our current and future membership of staff working in these services, but also for students, the next generation of professionals. Making this material available on subscription to higher education as a teaching and learning resource would be a potentially huge source of income in the longer term, allowing us to then do more in enabling developments on the ground, perhaps even funding some research ourselves. We then have a virtuous circle. The question for us now, as an embryonic but highly ambitious company, is how? How do we need to be organised, geared to develop, to grow? And what strategic directions and priorities are we in a position to develop?